Gil Gross with the Athletics, Matthew Gutierrez for Cuse Countdown. Matt, thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me. Big fan of yours and the rest of the gang at Citrus, so appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate that. All right, so Georgia Tech, Syracuse gets its first win of 2020, and one number that Orange fans were very happy to see is one sack against Tommy DeVito. What do you make of that number? Is that Georgia Tech's defensive line being one of the worst in the ACC, or do you really think that Cuse's offensive line can turn a corner here?
Probably a little bit of both, but mostly the former. Georgia Tech, as you said, one of the worst defensive lines, not only in the ACC, but I think in all of power football. Abysmal to watch. They have a lot of other issues too, as we saw in that game. I was just texting with one of the writers down there, and he said it might be a really long year for the Yellow Jackets, as they showed on Saturday. But it's hard to gauge Syracuse's performance offensively against such a weak defense that made so many mistakes. And I mean, credit to the Syracuse defense, but Georgia Tech, that game was probably theirs to win, actually, late, especially before Syracuse went away with the last couple scores and the pitch touchdown, especially at the end there. Again, I think Cuse offensive line still cause for concern moving forward. They'll probably get by Duke and Liberty fine. It might even look fine. Tommy might not even get sacked at all in those two games combined, or maybe only once. But heading into Clemson and then beyond, November has not always been good to the Cuse football slate record-wise. I would be more concerned about down the line. That said, though, Cuse does have some time to, get some guys healthy and maybe fix up some of those communication technique issues.
I am interested to see what happens at the running back position because watching the Georgia Tech game, at first I had thought that Sean Tucker was inserted because he was the most effective back. And then after the game, Dino Babers said, actually, Jawar Jordan got nicked up early on, and that's why Tucker was inserted, but he ends up going for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. So what do you expect to see after this bye week in the backfield for Syracuse?
It's tough. I would probably, if you're Dino Babers, I think they're going to go with Sean Tucker off the gate. I mean, he solidified the spot pretty clearly. Again, it was Georgia Tech. If you can't run on that defensive line, it's going to be a really long year, right? But his ability, I mean, he did execute. You still have to go out and pick up yardage, make plays, which he did. I would say Sean Tucker's the running back number one. And, if you're Syracuse, true freshman here, a little bit overlooked probably recruiting-wise, but he's explosive. He's a shiftier, smaller back that can really run. And when he gets in the open field a little bit, I think he could take this position with a couple more solid weeks as a freshman running back. If you're Dino Babers, Sterling Gilbert, that offensive side, you probably take a deep breath knowing you had that locked up after top two guys opted out of the season just a few weeks ago.
And another thing that's a bit unclear is the secondary weapon for Tommy DeVito through the air, because Taj Harris has emerged as a deep threat. Now 2 games in a row, he's had a touchdown over 40 yards. But after that, it is kind of up in the air. Anthony Quealy, as the second outside wide receiver, hasn't really broken through. Nykeem Johnson had a good week last week. The tight ends still haven't really gotten involved. Who do you think is going to need to step up as that number 2 target?
I don't know right now. I mean, because especially with under Sterling's offenses, even in past years, I think it had been noted on Twitter, and if you go and look, he does not involve tight ends at all. It's been written about a couple of places already the past couple of weeks here in Syracuse. And Dino Babers, runs contrary to Babers, right? For years since he got to Cuse, when I covered the team a little bit more closely, even at the Daily Orange, as a student, I remember a few press conferences with Dungy and that crew. He spoke very highly, both Dungy and Babers, of the tight ends and how important that is in the Syracuse offense and what Dino's trying to do from Bowling Green and from Northern Illinois to Cuse. He wants to involve them, balance them out with the outside guys and a lot of the screen passes that you see. So to answer it, probably tight end. I think though that Sterling will opt to do that? I don't know. There's no question they need to target those guys more. You look at the film, they've been open. Tommy has seen tight ends before and taken sacks or thrown the ball away when tight ends were open on the play, and he clearly that was not option A or B in his mind. I don't know if that's more systematic, something he's heard from Sterling, if that's in Tommy's mind. He wants to go to his top guys on the outside and pick up big yardage, or just simply not throw the ball. But I think if you're Syracuse, you got to involve these tight ends that they've been open a number of times in these past few games.
The talent is there with Aaron Hackett, who's a big physical receiver. Then Luke Benson's got great speed for his size as well. But let's zoom out and think about the ACC a little bit. Probably the biggest surprise has been Miami after beating Louisville and Florida State. They have a bye week next week, but then they play Clemson. So that could be a premier matchup in the ACC. What have you seen from this Hurricanes team?
Yeah, I've caught them a little bit, read some of my colleagues' work on them, and A, they've been a surprise, and B, they have a lot of talent, a lot of speed. The defense has been really solid, collecting the turnovers, and it's a funny environment to play in, sort of pre-COVID, with an interesting fan base in a pro-dominated city, pro market. I was down there a few years ago. If you recall, you might have been a freshman maybe. Dungy's junior year, Cuse went down there. I think Miami was number 8. Put up a really good fight, actually. I think the week after beating Clemson, I believe.
Dungy kicked someone in the face.
Yeah, that game. Miami was good then. They've always been really solid. Syracuse doesn't play them a ton now. Since the Big East, they both left the Big East. Pretty neat matchup though. And what I've heard is they're going to be a really tough game. Really for anybody, probably aside from Clemson. I think Clemson just overwhelms a lot of these teams. Just a lot of talent on Miami. They're going to get after guys. I think they salivate when they see like a Tommy DeVito type player, and that they can really get to him and play with him and disrupt an offense like that.
We're still trying to figure out Syracuse's level here, but what's a matchup that you're circling on their schedule and really looking forward to?
There's a couple. I think BC, Wake, kind of just like that November area. I always have kind of looked to, because of how much Syracuse has struggled in that month. Part of that is, Eric Dungy was essentially hurt for a lot of Novembers during his career, and some of those 4-8 teams, that record probably wasn't indicative of what those teams could do, especially in maybe 2017, especially. You're looking at probably some 6-6 teams that get a bowl game. And then, just these are sort of run-of-the-mill ACC games, basically. BC, these Wake Forests, these sort of unranked teams that aren't going to blow you away. But if you're Syracuse, that's an open path for you to win games, get to 500, get to bowl game. It might not be pretty. It might not be, in a pre-COVID era, a lot of fans in the Dome, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. But you win those games, you're in a completely different spot. You get to back to the bowl game. My colleague Stuart Mandel this week had put in a way too early bowl projection Syracuse versus Purdue in the Pinstripe Bowl. To get to something like that, I think Cuse needs to continue to just beat the teams they're capable of beating. Beat the teams they can compete with. No need to go out and beat Clemson, but go 0-3 and 0-4 in November, when you can go 2-2 or 3-1 in that month. So maybe not a particular team, but I'm really watching for, say Syracuse gets to 3-3 after Clemson, what they do after that. That'll be, that could be the difference between a 500 club or another year under 500, which would be the 4th out of 5 years under Babers that they would be under 500. So again, that last month, something to watch.
That's a good point. There's been a couple of years now where after the Clemson game, Syracuse has gone winless. A couple 4-4 seasons where the Orange finished 4-8. Dino Babers' early years, but perhaps his first 2, if I remember correctly. So I like that pick, Goody. I like it. Where do we have Syracuse? If you were to kind of tier or power rank, but we won't get that specific, do you see them as a middle of the pack ACC team, or do you see them closer to the basement?
It's tough, right? We don't have a good way to gauge them, I think, because of how bad Georgia Tech is. And again, I don't want to discredit the defense. Tony White in year one, no spring practice essentially, comes in, new formation, and they've been so good. Those two scores those first couple weeks on the road against top 25 teams, the points they gave up probably not reflective of how good they were. That defense has just been really impressive. Decent, deep, really solid defensive line. Obviously, a lot of athletes. We want to give them a lot of credit. Special teams, always solid. I mean, they've been really good for several years now. You can almost count on them not making mistakes in games, which you win the field position battle, at least remotely in games. Again, just the biggest question I still have is with the offense. I don't want to read too much into the Georgia Tech game and say everything's solved, the line's good, Tommy's going to be a lot better. I think, get Duke and Liberty are not impressive at all. You get by those two teams. Clemson also an anomaly. So really you're like in week 8 now where we can kind of really start to judge Syracuse against some of these more average ACC teams. And look, I mean, to answer your question, I think they could be middle of the pack. If they can compete with the teams they're supposed to compete with, like a Boston College, and beat those sorts of teams, they're in good position for a 500 record. And I think at Cuse, there's no reason they can't go 500. And, for as much as we make out of the ACC, they got Notre Dame, Clemson, Miami, UNC, Pitt. Cuse has already got 2 ranked teams knocked off the schedule. There's a path. There's very much a path for them to play 500 football and at least be middle of the pack. I think the Athletics, one of my colleagues wrote a power ranking. I think he has Cuse right about 40 right now in the country, which is very respectable. That's they were at 57 entering Georgia Tech, so that was a win that booted them up nicely. If they can continue that into Clemson, at least show some strengths against the Tigers, right? You don't have to beat them, but if you can, not get demolished, basically, I think you have some momentum going into that last stretch of the year.
For sure. There you have it. You can read Matthew Gutierrez at The Athletic. Do we have any promo codes? 40% off? No, I'm just joking.
$1
Do we?
now, man.
We have a $1 promo code?
$1 for a limited time if you want to subscribe. I know that's good for the college student budget. It's good for the any budget, especially in a pandemic. No, I appreciate you mentioning that. But,
I'm glad I asked. As
Syracuse alum Anish Shroff has noted, it should be 44% off for Syracuse, but we're not quite there yet. It usually would be 40% if we had the promo.
Goody, thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, Gill. Great questions. Always a pleasure.